You are live.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Senate Committee on Government Operations Committee meeting of Tuesday, May 20th, 2025. We're going to take up H474, and this will be draft number 5.4, which Attorney Devlin has sent to us at 9 o'clock this morning. And I had thought at one point this might be the final iteration, but maybe not. So it might be helpful for committee members.
Yeah.
Well, you tell me. You want to just walk through the yellow highlighted changes, or do you? I can't imagine we need to walk through the whole bill again.
Please don't.
For the record, Tim Devlin, attorney, legislative counsel. I just wanted to note quickly for the committee that the highlights are all the changes to date. Okay, so that we don't have two different types of color and highlights, but I'm happy to point out the latest round of changes.
And while he's doing that, if he'd be kind enough to clarify the one by empathy, which we had questions.
Sure. If you can look it up.
Okay, I'll just turn it off. That's all. Okay.
It is posted here page and Lauren this on Zoom.
Oh, okay.
Hello, Lauren.
Welcome in.
Oh.
There we go. So, yeah, let's, actually, some of the changes have been here quite a while, so I think we've kind of digested them. For instance, on page 2, line 16, the electronic balloting, we took that out quite a while ago. I don't think we have to go through that again.
Before we get to the first section 1 by candidacy, section 4 is right there. Would you be kind enough to clarify for us?
Yes.
Because each of us sort of thought it was different.
The let's see, 1 by candidacy is two sections here. So so I'm working off an older overview here. So get myself up to speed here. So one section that will create a new subsection C in 17 VSA 2381, which is the applicability of subchapter that is under nomination by party committee. So we're in the primaries here. Or I should say before general election. And the subsection will read, in no event shall a candidate who loses a major party primary be nominated to appear on the general election ballot pursuant to this subchapter by a committee of any party other than the party for which the candidate appeared on the primary ballot. And then parallel language for independent candidates is in the following statutory section that is 17 VSA 2401 and adds mirroring language in subsection B, reading a candidate who loses a major party primary for any office shall not appear on the general election ballot as an independent candidate for the same office for which the candidate lost in the primary election. And so together we have essentially a prohibition for anybody who runs in a primary who loses to another candidate. This would prevent that person from being later nominated for any other party or running as independent. So essentially, if you lose the primary, you're prevented from running the general.
One by one or done.
Yep, 1 by candidate.
So,
And
Samir Vihos.
I'm sure it comes as no surprise, given the space that I sit in and limiting ballot access and limiting democracy, that I can't support this.
Okay. Any other comments from committee?
Yeah, I'm supportive of it. You know, I think if you're going to run in a primary and then you lose the primary and then you run again as a different party or get appointed to a different party and run as an independent, it kind of makes the first run moot. And I don't think it sets up, I think it sets up for folks who, I actually think it can be more confusing for folks who are voting than less. And I also think that people can make informed decisions to choose to not run in a primary if they feel that they either would not be successful, or my hope is that the reason they're running in a primary or not is because their values or their whole politics align with the party that they're running for the primary in. So if you didn't win that primary, what in the time between losing the primary and then running in the general has changed about your values or your precedent? With that said, if it's removed, it would not change my vote on the bill, and I would like to see this bill pass.
Senator Clarkson? I thought you had your hand up.
Yeah, I did, because before you added your bit, I was just gonna add what Becca added, which is, I think you put your lot in with a value set when you decide to run in the primary. And I often feel very used as
Yeah.
in the Democratic primary, I often feel very used by candidates who then choose not to run as a Democrat, or who lose and then run as something else. And I think, really, you just invested a whole lot of time and energy and our constituents' focus, and now you're abandoning ship. I don't understand it. So I actually support this, but it wouldn't be the end of the world if it came out and everyone else is not happy with it. But I appreciate Tanya's point of view on this. But
Ditto.
Senator Hart, do you have an opinion?
Yep, I mirror Tanya. on it.
you think that people should be allowed to run in if they lose in the primary?
If they lose in their primary and they want to come back in on the Thursday beforehand as an independent or something like that, they should be able to do that.
That's a right.
This doesn't, this says exactly the opposite.
Right, but I don't support that. And Larry's agreeing that he also doesn't support the section.
Yeah, that section I thought.
Oh, okay. Well, as the lone wolf then, I strongly support this staying in. And I have, as I think I've made pretty clear with everybody that asked me, the second one is the one that I can't vote for the bill if the ranked choice voting is still in there. So it looks like, if you are making a motion to remove that provision, you certainly have enough votes to do that.
I would definitely support and make the motion to remove that provision. That would make it so I could vote for the bill, though there are things I would like to see in the bill that aren't currently there. Taking that out wouldn't make it. So given the work that we've done on the write-in candidacy pieces, I could support it.
So yeah, may I just make a suggestion that I would love to take this one up first, because if there are other things that I would like to keep one by candidacy in, because I support it strongly enough. I agree with our chair. I'd like to see what the other things that are in play that are the things people care about. So yes, before I decide to vote on pulling this out.
Sure.
So
Can I build on that? So if I understand correctly, there is just one section that having it removed would make you feel more comfortable with the bill, and that's section 1. Or are there other sections that would?
No, I think if that came out, I could vote for that.
Okay, and then so it would be, the debate is kind of taking out section 1, the ranked choice voting report, or section 4, or other things that, so that's kind of where I'm at, is like, what's the list of things?
As far as I'm concerned, if section 4, I can vote for the bill. I would like to see other things in the bill, and I'm disappointed that we haven't done the work to put some of the other things in the bill.
Oh, okay.
But if section 4 and section 5 come out, because those sections are both, then I can vote for the bill.
Mhm, okay.
It just doesn't do everything I would like it to, and that disappoints me, but there's nothing else. We have done enough work on the write-in candidacy piece that as much as I don't love it, I can still vote for the bill.
Okay. So, and if we just had, let's say, for both of you, if we just deleted everything before sections, oh no, because you want section 1 in there, and you're,
So these two are polar opposites on section 1.
yeah,
And I don't think there's any way of getting around.
yeah.
So that's part of the challenge.
Yeah.
Where are you, Larry, on section 1?
Reading it,
What did you say?
I'm reading it.
Reading it.
Oh.
Yeah, I think main thought process that I'm having is I would be sad if as a committee, knowing that we are the full tripartisan spectrum on this elections bill, it doesn't feel as good to me for us to not have representation by each political party on this bill, at least voting for it in committee. And I think that to lose the Republican chair on this bill would be a very bad sign for us to move forward with an elections bill. So that weighs on me, being the second largest party, not being kind of represented and supportive of the bill for the Senate. But then at the same time, the minority party, the smallest party, also not feeling good about it.
And the vice chair.
Yeah, and the vice chair. Yeah.
We're stuck between a rock and a
I know.
hard place.
Yeah. So I guess, okay.
Did you need more time, Larry, to read section 1?
No, I just read it.
Okay.
It's small.
What are your reflections?
I don't have a lot to say about it, to be honest with you, other than the ranked choice voting. I'd like to have a better definition of what ranked choice voting is.
Oh, but that's defined in statute.
And our report can provide that.
And the study is just a study.
You are very good. You are very good.
She is good.
Okay, let me suggest this in accord with Senator Clarkson's suggestion. Let's move on and see what else
See what we.
Senator
agree to.
Bukowski might suggest we do. So Tim, go.
So the newest changes can be described in kind of 3 broad categories. One are adjustments to the write-in sections.
Yep.
This is in sections 9 through 12, and we'll get to those in a bit. Let's see. Amendment in section 31 having to do with at-will municipal officers, turning them to at-will. Sorry, yeah, at-will. And then a lot of the highlights will be in sections 15 through 17. We'll have multiple kind of like 15 A, B, C, D, E, F. And this is having to do with updating the terminology in campaign finance, specifically what's casually called super PACs. And this is the independent expenditure handling political committees. And most of it is really just simply inserting, I should say, characterizing it as breaking out the definition into its own terms so that it's no longer really a subset of political committees, but really its own term, and because it's its own term, not to be underneath the existing one, really adding it in wherever political committee really appears elsewhere in financial, in the campaign finance chapter. So we can kind of probably quickly go through. I'll go back up to section 9 and discuss what has been adjusted in the write-in sections. And so, let's see.
Section 9 begins at the bottom of page 4.
Yes. And so, let's see, on page 5, just to kind of set the table a little bit, the committee will recall that really the nature of the amendments as they came over from the House was that in order for write-in campaign candidates' votes to be counted by election officials and clerks on the night of election, they have to essentially pre-register. And that was to be not later than 5 p.m. on Thursday preceding the primary election. This has that highlighted language in page 5, and that time was adjusted by this committee on previous meetings. So if we go down to 2, we have our first amendment notwithstanding, and this creates kind of an exception to the rule. When do the committee, or when does a write-in candidate not have to pre-register a file for the Secretary of State's office of the department? And so here it reads on, this is on line 11, notwithstanding subdivision 1 of the subsection, a write-in candidate is not required to file if A, the candidate has already filed consent to the printing of the candidate's name on the ballot for a major party, political party, as provided in sections 20 through 61, 2385, 2402 of this title. And this is new language and gets to the idea of how to deal with fusion candidates. As you recall, candidates under current law can run for, be printed on the ballot of one party and then launch a write-in campaign to secure the nomination of another party. So this accommodates that so that those, we'll see later in the mechanics part of counting votes, but right here, a candidate who has essentially already filed their consent candidacy form in a major party doesn't have to file again for the write-in portion. So, yes.
Senator Vigilski.
So one of the things, and this may not change anything, I'm just curious, but one of the things that we've heard is one of the reasons to do the sort of write-in registry is so you might be able to tell everyone all the different names you might use. Is that anywhere in the consent of candidacy form too? Because I could see it happening where someone looks down the ballot and sees my name and is like, I don't think that's how she spells her last name. So they write in some strange version of my last name, or in the case of, Deputy Secretary of State, they're like, oh, but I'm voting for Sarah Hibbert, not Lauren Hibbert. And so they write in that person. Does that consent form contain that same type of information so a clerk would know that Lauren and Sarah Hibbert are actually the same person?
This bill requires uniformity in filing across all forms. So once they register the campaign finance information, the Secretary of State, then that information has to be replicated with consent candidacy forms and the other category. But I don't know, I can't really speak to exactly, if those forms will. I would probably defer to the Secretary of State's office to say if there's any, contingencies for, how else may a candidate expect to have their information portrayed. I imagine, well, maybe not, but there is a provision later on in the accounting where it's like, clearly, what is it? It's sorry, this is in section 11,
that kind of.
nickname, indeed, and let me pull up it's they're clear, sorry. And add together the names of candidates of both subdivisions that are clearly the same person, even though the nickname or last name is used. So that's what's in current law, and that's what's being carried forward here. So it's half answered your question, but the first Secretary of State's office, that's exactly how they accommodate candidate forms and what they may anticipate, maybe various butcherings of their name.
Oh, I will wait for the Secretary of State then, because it's not just, so one of my understandings is the write-in filing is supposed to list, like, here's all the other names I'd like to apply so that you know, but the current consent candidate forms don't ask for that from candidates that are going to be named on the ballot.
Right, they just ask for how you want to be named.
Right, but they don't ask for, like, are there other names people might call you and or might write you in as?
And hey, here doesn't count.
Right.
Senator Claus.
So I'm just curious, on the write-in, let's say they arrive at the clerk's office at 4:59 on Thursday. Do they at the same time, Sean, sign a consent letter, a consent form too?
Do you want me to?
Sure, I'm just curious the
Sean,
answer.
for the record, Sean Sheehan, Elections Director, Secretary of State. And to the point here to clarify the bill, so there's actually two sets of forms. The consent form, as Tim said, the idea is to be consistent across all forms that people are coming in.
Right.
The purpose of the consent form is to state that you're willing to have your name on the ballot and you're willing to serve if elected. As written, they would have to, a write-in candidate would have to file that consent form for the primary, before they're declared the winner and able to be on the general election ballot. It wouldn't have to happen prior to the primary election. And as you've all noted, the consent form doesn't get into all the details. It's different than the registration to have your vote counted. So the registration to have your vote counted, one model that we've had looked at is what Brattleboro has in their town charter, and that's where you do state you want to have your votes counted. Here are various names that you're known as, nicknames, middle name, variations of the name, what's both for, and that's given to the BCA. So that's what would need to be filed by Thursday at 5 p.m. is the request to have your votes counted. You would then have to follow up with a consent form if you were actually to win and want to be counted, so that you would then be on the same path and be beholden to the same rules regarding campaign finance registration, regarding everything else that with the consent form. So that's the distinction between the two.
So there's nothing in this bill that calls out the ability to do that. In other words, to list 4 other ways of referring to Senator Yost.
No, that it doesn't specifically get into those details, but that is what would be part of. I think this bill specifically calls out that they can go directly to their clerk to notify them, or that the Secretary of State's office will set up a means for them to notify us electronically, which partly then changes the consent form as a paper hard copy, wedding signature that they would have to follow up with. But the electronic communication that we'll be setting up would have those questions of here's what to look for, here's the variations of my name. That's what they would have to get to us by 5 p.m. Thursday.
Right, and I guess what my concern is we're saying that if the person is named on the ballot, their write-ins are, for any election, their write-ins are counted. But if we are not providing the information that some people know me as Lauren and some people know me as Sarah, but I want Lauren on the ballot, and sorry, Lauren, that I keep using your example, then people may not know, because I'm listed on the ballot as Lauren Hibbert, that they should also be counting Sarah Hibbert, because I have no way on the consent form, because I'm a named candidate, to say, hey, that's also my name.
Well, we
Sure,
have Hibbert on there, I mean.
Yeah, that's certainly something we could address. I mean, I think that the twofold. One, even though named candidates, as we put in the bill here, I think at the request of the community broadly, in the House too, aren't named candidates for one party primary aren't required to submit the form requesting that their votes, their write-in votes would be counted. They automatically will be. There's nothing preventing them from filling out that form. So if in the case of Deputy Secretary Hibbert, if she was running and wanted to make sure that BCAs knew to be looking for Sarah Hibbert, to be looking for other variations, should still be able to fill out that same request, that same communication, and submit it to our office, just like somebody who isn't named at all. And then that instruction would be given to the election officials to look for those variations.
I don't think anything needs to change in this bill for this, but I think it may just make sense to update our consent of candidacy form to include, are there any other names that you may go by, rather than ask candidates to do 2 separate processes.
Yeah, it's fine.
Well, there's one central process normally. We begin with the consent form.
Right, but I think that should include, are there any other, if we're saying that if you've done the consent form and you're going to be on the ballot, we're going to count all your write-ins, there should be a space on there for you to name that these are other names that people might write in, and that's still me, as opposed to asking them to file the consent form and the write-in candidacy form.
So why would you have to do, you wouldn't do it? Wait, I'm confused.
I have to say, I think that we're making a lot more work for our clerks. I really think that if you do sign a consent form, that is how you want your supporters to vote for you, using that name. And I'm not, I think that, people, the most famous sort of name in the General Assembly, nickname at the moment in the General Assembly is Coach Christie. He does his consent form as Kevin Coach Christie.
Exactly.
So I think driving people to one thing, I think to have everybody looking at all those different nicknames is just not fair to do. I mean, it's one thing on a small local election, but not.
But we're doing it
countywide.
for write-in candidates. We are saying for write-in candidates that's why we want them to do this, is so that the clerks know the different things they should be looking.
But that's a write-in
If
candidate.
you're going to be a named candidate and we're going to count your write-in votes, if you're a named candidate, you should also have a space on your consent form to provide that information. We're saying that providing that information makes it easier for clerks. So I don't think anything has to change in the bill. I think it just needs to be an update on the consent of candidacy form where you can add that information.
Yeah, I think that that's a reasonable point. I think the likelihood that someone sees Rebecca White on the ballot and goes, well, I want to vote for Becca White, and then writes in Becca White at the bottom, and the clerk doesn't count it like that, c'est la vie. Like, I don't know, like it's like it's somewhat, usually when you're a candidate and you're on the ballot, you say, I'm gonna be on the ballot, like I say, I'm on the ballot underneath this candidate, circle my name. So if someone truly does not get the understanding that this name relates to the candidate that I want, and they write in a different name, that's kind of on that candidate. You have your name on the ballot written a certain way. If you're not communicating your name properly,
Yeah.
Well, then we shouldn't need to do this write-in thing at all, because
No,
if
this
people aren't communicating their name properly, then.
sure, well, I would agree. I agree with that logic. But the thing is, we're trying to be nice to your point from earlier, which is
For
trying
last
to-
minute
which is the last minute candidate, and people may not be as well informed. If you're a candidate on the ballot and you
And
can
you've got to be
inform your
prepared
voters,
to run.
yeah, people, you should be promoting your name on your campaign signs, on your literature, in the media, all the same name.
Correct.
So the write-in candidate, I'm trying to be nice to this write-in candidate.
Who's the last
was
minute
the
candidate.
spur of the moment, could win.
I don't think it's the end of the world to add a spot on the consent form that simply says, because as someone who has people in my own family who have decided partway through their life, like, oh, I'm not gonna go by that name, how difficult it is to change people who've got ingrained ideas in their brains about what your name is.
Well, then you should make sure when you're campaigning to clarify what your name is.
Yeah, and I can think of plenty of instances where people either refuse or can't wrap their head around, that's not your name. And
Okay,
again, it doesn't need to change the bill, so I would
I like the thought experiment.
make the
I'm
request
open
that
to-
our consent of candidate forms get updated.
Okay.
I thought the intent of using the campaign finance,
Was
for
so
lack
that
of a
people
better
can have
word
different-
moniker, matching the consent form was to get some uniformity
Yes.
in this.
Like between
And
write-ins.
yet-
Yeah.
I'm hearing that maybe we want to have a whole bunch of other names that could be
Counted.
used. And
No. If we're saying we're going to count someone's names and they're like, oh, you know what, some people just know me as this, so the clerk should look out for it. That's not changing what I'm running as, what I'm filing as, what my name is on the ballot. It's just giving the clerk the information, as we are with the write-in candidates, that most people are gonna see Lauren Hibbert and know that that's who I am, but there are this small contingent of people that might write in Sarah. Just giving the clerks more information.
So,
But
given it's a big bill, let's mark this as a question.
we don't have to change anything in the bill. So I don't even think we have to mark this question. We don't have to change anything in the bill. The Secretary of State's office is perfectly
Just
capable
making
of
eye
updating
contact.
forms.
We're happy to talk to the clerks about that and look at our.
Great.
policies.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see, back on page 5. So again, we're talking about exceptions to when that write-in candidate needs to pre-file. So the first exception is, again, if you have, this is on 2 subdivision A. The recapping, the first exception is that if you have filed a consent candidacy form already for a major political party, you don't have to do it again. Then we could turn to B. If no candidate is printed on the ballot, or if a candidate whose name is printed on the ballot dies, or is otherwise disqualified prior to 7 p.m. on election day. So that should sound familiar, but I just want to point out that the timeline has been changed too. It was matching, was it 5 o'clock Thursday proceeding, have been moved back to 7 p.m. on election day. So if a candidate dies prior to the election and somebody is interested in running as a write-in, they would not have to go through the new process. Okay, so now we go to page 6. And let's see. This is in subsection C, the same section. It will now read, before becoming the party's candidate in a general election, the write-in candidate who qualifies as the primary winner under this section must, 1, still be determined as the winner under section 2369, the chapters, which is plurality, with, and 2, file a consent similar in form to the consent prescribed by sections 2361, 2385, 2402, this title of the Secretary of State. So essentially, this write-in winner collects enough votes to actually win by plurality. Then they have to go ahead and file a consent form to be for the next election. That is the general election. Okay. Yep. 10.
Hey, we're fine with, well, pretty much all these sections, aren't we?
And I should note that 9, 10, and 12 are very similar, and so we have, the information how repeated duplicate. But I do want to point out the more mechanical section, and that is the rules for counting votes in section 11. Here we have, kind of sibling language, but it is important for the whole counting process. So at the top of page 8, we have subsection, subdivision E2 that reads, the election officials counting ballots and tallying sheets shall A, count write-in votes, division Roman I. They shall count write-in votes for candidates who have filed in compliance with section 2370, 2472, or 2702 of this title. And that is again the filing, the new filing we were talking about. And or have filed the consent to the printing of the candidate's name on the ballot or major political party. Those other sections there. 2, for all as write-in the local election, the election officials shall count write-in votes. 2, for all candidates if no candidate is printed on the ballot, or if a candidate whose name is printed on the ballot dies or is otherwise disqualified prior to 7 p.m. on election day. So parallel language there again, but this is just kind of flip side of the coin here, having to do with counting versus one clock. Let's see. And what else is new here? Okay, and this is the kind of safe harbor savings provision here that the committee was expressed concern about last time about what happens if those individuals, nevertheless, don't file and nobody's died, etc. Will their votes still count? This new language, or I should say revised language in here, does ensure that they are. So we can see under, and maybe it's best just to kind of read through it for additional context. So continuing with 2, what the election officials counting ballots and telling us shall do, they shall also add together the names of candidates counted under subdivision A and subdivision 2 that are clearly the same person, even though the nickname or last name is used, as I just previously brought up. C, they shall record the name and vote totals on the tally sheet of a write-in candidate having votes counted pursuant to subdivision A and subdivision 2, and list those candidates individually, and record all of the write-in votes on the tally sheet as an aggregate, or as quote other write-ins. So here's the savings provision now in section 3. Notwithstanding any contrary provisions in subdivision 2A of the subsection, if the number of quote other write-ins quote for the same nomination or office equals or exceeds the number of votes cast for any candidate for the same nomination or office who appears to have been nominated or elected, the election official shall record the name and vote tallies on the tally sheet for all candidates for the nomination for office. So that's simple enough, and it gets to again in single town district, and kind of continue the multi-member districts in the budget. Again, if there appears to be more write-ins than the person prints on the ballot, then at that point, election officials go through and count to determine whether it actually provided did win or not.
And just to be clear, that in the case of like a multi-person election, it still allows the lowest vote getting person if there's write-ins more than the lowest vote getting winner.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah.
Thank you.
If this, sorry, and then so moving on. If this result occurs in a multiple municipality district, but one or more municipalities do not record the name and vote totals for all the candidates, the Secretary of State, on the day after the election, shall order the town clerk to reconvene the board of civil authority. In the presence of at least 2 other election officials who are not members of the same political party, the clerk shall open the ballot containers, list all write-ins for this nomination for office individually, and record the write-in votes for all candidates. The clerk shall then place the entire contents in containers, fix new seals, and transmit the new seal numbers. So again, this contemplates a situation where clerks wouldn't necessarily know if the number of write-ins surpasses the apparent winner. that is of a number of votes received by somebody printed on the ballot. And so the Secretary of State recognizes that situation, orders reconvening civil board authorities, containers are opened, and then that is determined. And then
Then it's revoked.
So this captures in language what that was with the chart. If this happens, this, yes, if this happens, yes, this happens, yes, kind of thing. Okay,
Oh, on an elections chart that Lauren did.
yes,
Sean is nodding agreement.
I'm nodding, yes,
okay.
and
for the break.
and section 12 is just that kind of language duplicates and is the same. So now we go on to campaign finance. There's no kind of a new reader assistant heading here, campaign finance, semicolon reporting thresholds. Those I don't believe have changed really. And just updating in reference to the candidates.
Our new threshold is,
And those thresholds, again, we're removing the $500 thresholds. And this hasn't been effective in this.
is basically for everybody except for a PAC. It's if you raise anything, you have to file.
Correct.
Right. That counts for at least two things you hate. It's just,
So
No, because if you come over here onto page 14, they don't actually have to report anything until it's still at 1,000. We didn't change that at all.
Correct.
They have,
I thought it was 500 per.
it's per candidate, it's 1,000 per PAC. So this is.
I
the
know,
one
but
have
the
a problem
problem
with.
is it's still for PACs. I
It's
know.
changing it. I think it should be zero for everyone, but
I
I'm
agree.
in a space now where like it, at the very least, PACs and people should match.
Right. Particularly if the Supreme Court likes to think of them as people.
Exactly. They shouldn't be more of a people than me.
They shouldn't be more than people.
Well, it's been suggested more than once by our attorney that we checked with, maybe it was Sean,
The Attorney
the
General.
Attorney General, to find out, because there are active cases, I believe, where it appears that the threshold of $1,000 is sort
It's
of,
the minimum so far.
yeah. So I don't know whether we would want to change it or not.
I don't, was Jillian, I guess Jillian didn't ask, because I thought we'd asked to have the EG come and just.
And I'm not against that, but that's what I remember hearing.
It just makes no sense to me that it holds up constitutionally that a candidate who has less resources in most instances than a corporation or a PAC, that it is not overly burdensome for an individual to report at 500, but it somehow is. I mean, if corporations are people too, they should have to follow the same rules as regular people.
Well, we can have the Attorney General's office come in tomorrow, if possible.
Do you want me to text Todd and see if he's in the building?
If
He
you'd
probably
like.
wouldn't know off the top of his head.
Okay,
So why don't we ask who's the elections person at AG's office? Oh, and,
Maybe we just ask.
the elections person, Sean?
Probably Leslie should start this.
Leslie. Leslie. What's her last name? You're remembering.
You're asking.
We'll figure it out between now and tomorrow.
okay.
Leslie Wells, and I would contact. I mean, you, or go through Todd. Todd may want to decide who.
Yeah.
On Delos, right?
Yes, Todd Delos and, but there's an actual person at AG's office.
Yeah, Leslie Wells would be the
WELTS.
WELTS. Yeah, should be the subject matter expert on that.
Right,
But
she's the
but Todd
person we should-
would pull her in if she.
That'd be great.
So in section 13, let's see. Actually, I should say section 14 is where we see the first kind of addition of existing term, but because it's redefined, these are the appropriate here. That is independent expenditure over political committees being inserted after political committees. So when it comes to campaign reporting and various kind of requirements that are put upon political committees, this bill will introduce kind of coupling, we'll say political committees and independent expenditure only political committees. So that both are largely, with the exception of campaign contributions and expenditures, will hold to the same laws. So this is page 13, top bottom of page, well, on top of page 13, you see that again. And you can just see the term is just underlined in various places. And now we kind of get into the meat of that, the new section header, campaign finance, semicolon, independent expenditure and political committees. And so section 15 is the definition section for the political campaign finance chapter. And we have the modified definition of what is an independent expenditure political committee. So independent expenditure only political committee means any one or more individuals or any corporation, labor organization, public interest group, or other entity excluding a public party that accepts contributions of $1,000 or more or makes expenditures of $1,000 or more within any 2-year election cycle for the purpose of supporting or opposing candidates, influencing an election, or advocating for or against a public question. And then we get to some existing language, which is very helpful to know. And also something that conducts its activities entirely independent candidates. And this is important insofar as this term matches its federal counterparts and how it's common understood across the legal landscape. Does not give contributions to candidates, political committees, or political parties, does not make related expenditures, and is not closely related to a political party or to a political committee that makes contributions to candidates or makes related expenditures. New language. Independent expenditure only political committee includes any self-funded individual, meaning an individual who receives no contributions from any other source for the purpose of supporting or opposing candidates, influencing election, or advocating for or against a public question. So it's important to appreciate a few different facets of this updated definition. One is that it captures single individuals, one or more individuals, and then followed by typically other entities that would form one of a super PAC. The other thing it does is that it, although it includes, clarifies who is a self-funded individual. And we'll get to some instances where that is kind of teased out in various statutes. But overall, it maintains the broadly recognized term for a super PAC, that is independent expenditure political committee, maintains many of the same features that are recognized in different aspects of government, that is by the federal government or by courts. And that is really its independence, operation from its political campaigns, PACs. Yes. So then moving on, political committee, this wasn't changed in this draft, but was by this committee an early iteration, also includes one or more individuals now. And let's see, 16 is where we have the first kind of insertion of the old, but now somewhat different term of independent expenditure on political committees. So we have that added to the title. And you'll see here, again, as I said before, we have it coupled with political committee or so that it says political committee or independent expenditure only political committee. And let's see, so here in 2922, it's important to point out that there is, so this is about registration, checking accounts and treasurers. Here we do insert the term self-funded individual when we put in context. So each political committee or independent expenditure on a political committee shall register with the Secretary of State 10 days after making expenditures of $1,000 or more and accepting contributions of $1,000 or more, stating its full name and address. Committees that are not self-funded individuals shall also state the name and address of the bank in which it maintains its campaign and checking account, and the name and the address of the treasurer responsible for maintaining a checking account. And this essentially just contemplates a situation where an individual who may be forming PAC, super PAC, may not have a designated campaign checking account because they're not raising any money. It's just their own capital. Let's see. So, and then Okay, and then similarly, in the next subsection B, all expenditures by a political committee or an expenditure only political committee that shall be paid by either a credit card or debit card, check, or other electronic transfer from a single campaign checking account as designated by the committee under subsection A of the section, or if under $250, the committee may make expenditure of cash. And then skipping down, a self-funded individual need not utilize a campaign checking account, but shall otherwise comply with this section. So again,
On page 16, I'm
Yes.
trying to hard to keeping up.
yes, so
After line 6. Okay.
and again, so that if there is an individual that forms one of these campaigns, or sorry, committees that, although they do not have to have a campaign checking account, they would still have to pay, make these expenditures with that kind of paper trail provided by a credit card, debit card, etc. Let's see. Next, substantive changes to 16A. Again, we insert the old new term into the title. Political committees, independent expenditure, only makes surplus campaign funds, and simply just adds the term after political committee. Return to 16B. This has to do with accepting contributions, and again, merely just adding the term. And they're after political committee. 16C, and sorry, we're at the bottom of page 17 now. This is a section on reports and general provisions. This also just adds the term after political committee. And so there's a jump in the page there. So we have 16D, and there we go. This, let's see, has to do with final reports, offered by various political entities, as the independent expenditure on the political committees in the title of it. And let's see, so we again added after political committee in B1, B2, really that's it. Section E inserts the term in a statutory section pertaining to identification and electioneering communications. Again, so they'll be treated the same as political committees. And going to page 20, in section 16F, adding a term in the context of the statutory section pertaining to specific identification requirements for radio, television, and internet communications. Again, so they'll be treated the same way as political committee. 17. Now we're at the top of page 21. We'll add this term and also political action committee to the title of 2970. That is campaign reports, political action committee, independent expenditure only political committees, public questions. And let's see. So here, some of the older text or current text, as you say, is slated for removal so that conforms with the definitions. Again, taking what would constitute a political action committee or an independent expenditure only political committee, and allowing for it to be just a single individual versus necessarily starting at 2 or more, just one. Let's see, and that is the end of those updates. Any questions before?
Thank you for the update.
So, page 26, this has to do with conformity for justices of the peace nominations. I believe that did say Monday in before the primary election. Now it's this Monday in July before primary election. So it appears the same in 2 different similar sections. Let's see, so that would be on to page 32. This is where we find 3 officers. Let's see, that is collector, delinquent taxes, municipal clerks, and treasurers. This is across 3 different statutory sections. All, let's see, the language is modified so that those position officers as appointed may be removed by the legislative body at will now. And that brings us to let's go. 38 has automatic voter registration. I don't think we've changed anything in that since last time. And let's see. Then we go to page 40 with the listing of candidate names on ballots. Senator, it's like so.
We sort of like thinking about our PFAS discussion this morning on the floor. Why don't we just do all municipal offices that are held by appointment to be at will? Why don't we just do them all? If they're appointed, they should all be at will.
The legislature has the power to do so. Off the top of my head, there.
We're sort of doing
What other positions are there?
Constables.
they're constant.
But are they a staff person? I think we're doing all the examples of staff people who are, I think this
Well,
is.
treasurer isn't always.
It's not
there as a
just,
staff.
that's, because that's part of the conversation, is how is an appointed position different than an employment position, and there are differences.
Yes, and I think we're only changing the ones that potentially are.
Well, that's,
Only a subsection of officers.
Yeah.
Right, officers to be treated, differently than employees is the first thing. Typically, officers are spelled out in statute or ordinance. A position that needs to be filled versus, employees, don't necessarily, have to, be spelled out in law necessarily to fluctuate up or down or something. Typically, under, it's common law from my colleagues, conversations with me, very quickly understand. Essentially, if written by appointment, then there has to essentially be a for cause removal is assumed by the
Yeah.
courts, unless otherwise spelled out in statute. So this is what is happening here at will. Granted, there are other officers existing maybe in charter or elsewhere in statute. The constables are just stated that yes, are being updated, and that's the legislature and the committee could opt to have some sort of blanket provision across all municipal offices if wanted. But that may have some other consequences I can't really speak to right now, not really knowing exactly what the other offices are or what the statutory appointments are for those positions.
we are what we are. That's it.
Yeah, I guess those are the three positions that I'm aware of that really run into the need for at will. Because to your point, like most of the time, I'm not aware of like a full-time healthcare provided constable. But I am.
Clerks, when we.
Well, that's, yeah, I think it's the
We have
clerks, the liquid cash.
treasurers, auditors,
I think that-
and who else?
I think that's them.
In this bill or just,
I mean, maybe a mayor, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
They're elected.
Maybe it's-
Exactly, yeah. Oh, yeah. You don't-
Town managers.
Town manager,
You're a
but
city attorney.
They're hired by the select board. They're
They're
never
already
appointed.
appointed.
They're not an elected position.
well, right, but these are appointed positions, and so that was my question, is a town manager or a city attorney
I think they
appointed
are
or
hired.
hired?
They're employees.
they can be both, having been assistant city attorney, I was both hired and appointed.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
So maybe we address that next year.
Administrators. There you go. Oh, what a good, I like that
Given
second.
where we are in this session, maybe next year.
But yeah, I like your idea of like with PFAS, maybe
Yeah,
we should
I mean,
stop
it's just-
nitpicking each
do
one
these-
rather than do it as a.
Do these one at a time, just seems silly.
And
Seems like it might be more complex.
that rounds out the changes in this draft. Again, everything highlighted has been changed by this committee to date. If there's any other questions about this, happy to speak. And then also I just want to point out Chair Collmore, as we were going to discuss beforehand too, there was an additional suggestion brought by the Secretary of State's office, county offices. I can let them speak. If you like as well.
sure, okay. And I guess we'll have to return to Senator Pihovsky's concerns.
Oh, so now we're there. Okay.
So.
But
and
everything
you're-
else we're.
And yours, I mean, because the major divisive issues are section 1 and section 4.
4-5.
4-5.
And I did want to hear from the Secretary of State, because the last time they were in,
Yes.
I had asked them some questions about the feasibility of penalties for campaign finance violations and randomized name order on the ballots. And so I do want to hear from them about that. Because those are the things I'd like to see added to the bill if possible.
Was random name ordering, what was the first one?
Campaign finance fines,
Campaign finance fines.
or yes,
Penalties.
penalties for violations of campaign finance
So
reporting.
we want to add
We do not.
that Secretary of State and AG, we want to ask about the
On
minimum
the
threshold.
fines, yeah.
I thought we
Or-
did have fines if you didn't file
No, they never
properly.
done it.
No, it never made it.
Oh, the $10 a day thing didn't happen?
So it's Sean.
On the law. for two
Fines, they're
bills.
not happening, right?
There's no fines on the candidate side, no. There is on.
If
in a lot
you
of people-
fail to
there are
file your
cases.
finance report, you don't get, there are no consequences. Other than public
Yes.
shame.
Public
Yes.
shaming is the.
Shame. But where are the stocks when you need them?
If we're bringing back old timey things, I don't know if it's the stocks that I'm choosing.
I don't
Oh, I
know.
did
which
not
is
hear
worse.
that as that. That makes more sense now. I was like,
Maybe we shouldn't have this discussion on the record.
We probably
Sorry.
shouldn't.
But there are certainly other ways to sadly know.
okay, so yeah.
Good, thank you. You're certainly welcome to take a seat. Do you want to testify, Sean? Do you want Lauren to, or?
I'm happy to if Lauren wants to.
Sure.
Come on, mine
You
certainly.
mean Sarah Lauren? That would be
Deputy
Sarah.
Secretary Sarah Lauren Hibbert.
Sarah Lauren, how,
My name before, but Sean Sheehan, Elections Director, Secretary of State, and
Sarah Lauren
Sarah-
Hibbert, Deputy Secretary of State.
I mean, to the questions that were just raised with Senator Mahowski, we have been looking into it, getting those, it's just been a couple days, I think, since we were in, so still getting those numbers for pricing out what the IT changes would be and associated for the bills. We don't have those answers yet. We are working on it, given the timing where we are, and then it seems more appropriate for the next bill from our perspective, to be able to get solid numbers and the financial costs, ramifications of doing the fines on that side. On the side of the randomization, that is a piece we have checked with our vendors. We would be able to do that. We would like it to be, consistent across the state, ideally in a way that was not confusing. Any way you do it, I know it's going to be confusing to voters, right? We'll be certainly hearing, clerks will be hearing, because it was different than the way it was. So we've taken an education after, given where we are in the session. I think our preference would be for that to be in the next bill too, just to take broader testimony. But as far as whether we can, logistically pull it off, yes, we can logistically pull off that if that is the desire of the committee to make that particular change at this time.
shuffle.
It's just more fair.
And the last item is Tim, overall, I think we're very supportive. Tim did a terrific job, we thought, on that latest version. I think hearing what the committee had and the wishes for the language with the independent expenditure, it meets our goals for closing the loophole of a single individual who is self-funded, not having to report. It meets our goal for having the consistency of reports across the type. So we're supportive of the bill there. As Tim referenced on the write-in side with the Visio that Deputy Secretary Hibbert shared last time, with the language Tim has that meets that. The one piece that we raised, as Tim alluded to, was the county officials right now, and has General Assembly, the statewide and the in the federal positions that would have this manner of counting the write-in votes. If county was added, that would make the whole front of the ballot all adhere to the same method, which we believe would be simpler to communicate to clerks in our training and to the public, to have that consistency for everything rather than local. But again, that's not a piece that we're I think given the changes that were made to ensure that we're counting everyone who could possibly win, regardless of whether or not they register, it's simplest to do that for the entire front of the ballot. But that's not one that the committee feels strongly one way or the other. At the end of May, we're fine with it either way. The clerks will appreciate it, and we will be able to communicate and advise them and the public on how this works.
Well, just again, in one man's opinion, the more we add to this bill, the more testimony we really should take, which delays the process even more. And I think presents challenges on the floor because there have been people that have been watching this bill all along.
Mhm.
And it may be one of those things where, as Sean said, you might be better off on the next bill, having 3-4 provisions that you can then flesh out a little bit more adequately. I mean, if in fact, next Friday is the day, it doesn't leave us a lot of room.
Well, and the House hasn't considered any of our changes yet.
True. Yeah.
And we fully agree, and we're supportive of the bill.
You mentioned you had one suggestion, or did you just go over that?
Oh, yeah, the one suggestion, I think that Tim referenced was just the one I said, just as far as for all those write-in provisions that are, as they are in the bill, are related to federal, statewide, and General Assembly. That's saying that county just takes that whole section of makes it everything except local, and it makes it everything on the front of the bill being done in a consistent, front of the ballot being done in a consistent way. We think that will be simpler and easier to understand. But again, I think to your point, if not making further changes or tweaking things, we're okay with that.
Okay.
We support this.
So next or tomorrow, hopefully we can have a representative from the Attorney General's office and to at least tell us more about the threshold for the independent only piece. Or is that, am I phrasing that correctly?
One bite.
More or less.
Yeah.
Super PACs.
It's no change.
Beyond that, I haven't received any inquiries or requests to testify about anything else in the bill. So I think we would be best served having it sort of ready to fire off when something else happens, if it's going to happen.
So the thing we're gonna have to duke out is sections 4 and 5 and section 1.
I think you're right. Maybe we take 24 hours to think about those and
I think that sounds like a good idea.
come back tomorrow with a decision. Anything else, committee? I mean, we have no other bills. I don't have another charter yet.
What have we gotten back from the House?
Nothing today. For some reason, H1 did not get sent over to the House. I believe we voted that out Thursday. So it should have been over there today, but
Matt was doing it in caucus.
my meeting earlier today with Representative Byron, he said it's not on the calendar. We don't see it. I don't know where it is.
I saw him though, because we had a cannabis discussion. We had that.
I know there's a straw vote that was already taken.
Oh, okay, because he said he was presenting it in caucus or on the floor or something. He was doing something today with it.
Okay, well,
They did a straw poll.
yeah, and I'm not sure how much of this is falling into the confidentiality piece
But
or
if they
not.
did it, did they do it on tape? So.
Well, I think, yeah, 902 to concur.
Oh, good. That would be.
So I think that bill will get passed and go on to the governor. But the other ones, 23, which is the synthetic media and the open meeting law, I haven't seen come across yet, so I don't know.
Yeah, and
They may change to both, but I don't know to what extent.
56 is gone, right? That S56 New Americans,
I think that was 59.
S56, creating the Office of New Americans.
Yeah, yes, you're right. 59 is the one that hasn't come back yet.
Yeah,
the open
that's
meeting.
the open
It
meeting.
was in their house calendar today.
Oh, well, you have information I didn't have, Larry.
Yeah, I saw that in their calendar.
Okay. So, there are other charters that I don't know whether we'll see or not. I believe Burlington has at least one more. And I think Essex had them, but I don't know whether they're gonna be taken up on the other side in time for anything to be done.
Oh, maybe hopefully they will unite the Burlington charters and vote them both.
we'll see.
We'll live it
Bring them
out.
back together.
Yes, uniting them again.
Anything else, ready? Okay, we will adjourn for the day. The floor tomorrow will be at 10. So I'm thinking that we
1
could
o'clock.
probably get 1 o'clock
1
tomorrow,
or 1:30, depending on what we.
whatever you guys prefer.
Oh, it will probably be 1:30. Given we have the Ed bill on the floor.
Okay,
And
let's do 1:30.